For people in small towns like Val Marie, Saskatchewan, agriculture is life. It's how people make their living and are connected to one another. Grain elevators were at the center of this. But what happened when these prairie landmarks started to disappear? Val Marie is one of the few towns that still has this reminder of farmers past and present, and it has great value to people like Doris Kornfeld and Denis Duquette.
The first memory that I have of country elevators was because I lived on a farm, and when we drove to town, the first things that we noticed as we were coming towards town was the tall grain elevators. And as you drove from one town to another, that was the buildings that always caught your attention. And that is why they've been dubbed the sentinels of the prairies, and they're disappearing. So we're fortunate in our community to have an original styled elevator that is being preserved. Not many communities have such a building.
My dad took me out of school at 13 years old. I was farming, and then when I got 16 years old, I got a permit book. So if you were going to be a farmer, you had to have a permit book of the Canadian Wheat Board. That's where I started at 16 years old. And after that, I could sell wheat. Yeah.
Elevators were a place that memories were made in and around, whether or not people realized it. And these memories are something that many people will never ever forget.
You know, I can remember as a young person in the town where I was raised that the trucks, of course, hauled very small loads compared to now, but there would be trucks lined up for a long ways waiting to get into the elevators, and many towns had 4 and 5 elevators. The odd town only had 1, but everybody had a person or 2 that ran all of those elevators, so it was a great employment for people in the small towns.
A lot of times when they opened a Kota, then they called it Kota.
Yeah.
When they had room, they called it Kota. They had room, so everybody went all in grain.
Yeah.
And there's always a line up there, right to the elevator, right to the streets, you know,
Yeah.
double.
Yeah.
And you visit with the farmers, waiting to, that's about it. And the best part was at 5 o'clock when they closed the elevator and went to the bar.
The meaning behind these elevators ran deep within every grain farmer and community member. So when they were no longer in use, everything changed.
The closing of the local elevators was the end of a formation or a foundation era in grain farming on the prairies. The disappearance of the railroad and the elevators has had a vast impact on small family farms, and everybody now is well aware of what's happening in all areas of grain farming as we know it.
We had 3 dealerships, we had a blacksmith shop, we had 3 grocery stores, we had 2 cafes, and they were both good. You know, now we haven't got a hell of a lot.
No, that's right.
When all this happens, so everybody goes to Swift Current and do most of their business, and they kill little towns. So they kill 3 grocery stores, 2 cafes, 3 dealerships, And the blacksmith shop where we had, we don't have nothing like that anymore.
You must always remember that the West and the area where we live in right here, that men in work boots and overalls made the West successful, not the men in three-piece suits and briefcases.
I'll tell you one thing, it was a lot better farming then than it is now. Seemed like when that all went, nobody seems to visit anymore. It's, you know, I don't know how to say that. No, I like farming better then than I do now. That's what I call farming. Now it's not farming anymore, it's a business. Well,
If there wouldn't have been elevators, there wouldn't be farming as we know it today. Definitely not.